Never thought I'd be able to tell you this. But sometimes life takes you so far that you don't even realize the whirlpool you're in. My name is Monica, and I'm 44 years old. My whole life is centered around one person, my son Timmy. The two of us have overcome challenges, risen from falls, and now, illuminated by the light of the moon, I strive to understand what happened that dramatic night. It all started when Timmy, a student and part-time worker, came home late, exhausted and pale. I noticed how he could barely stand on his feet and suggested that he rest in my bed. This simple concern should not have caused anything strange. I covered him with a warm blanket, reached up to correct him, and couldn't figure out what was going on. There seemed to be something inexpressible in the air that chilly night. I felt as if I was over the edge, not knowing what to think or feel. When I settled next to him, he snuggled up against me, and for a second he reminded me of what he was like as a child. His body sought warmth, and I found myself tangled between a mother and a woman who found inexhaustible tenderness in this closeness. But then the realization came. His arm came around mine, and I froze. Thoughts rushed through my mind, but they all disintegrated like fragile shards of glass that were hard to control. The silence in the room was more oppressive than soothing. I could feel the tension rising, like the tense strings of a taut rope ready to break at any moment. I tried to pull away, as if a withheld spirit was rising up to release me from this bond. But my body wouldn't give in, and I remained immobile in this trap of emotion. I squinted, trying to determine what was going on in his eyes. They were full of a strange warmth and certainty, like he was asking a question he didn't know the answer to. A storm of feelings erupted inside me. Fear, confusion, and, suddenly, only I could feel his breath, steady and soothing, only becoming more suffocating. Timmy shifted closer again, his hand touching my skin, and a whirlwind of sensations swept over me like a sweet poison poisoning my mind. The moment stretched on, and my heart raced, the rhythm reminiscent of the ups and downs of the abyss. I felt confined, searching for words to justify my silence, but only sensed a wordless understanding between us. It was a connection I couldn't explain, but the feeling of it was unbearably strong. Blurred lines of definition of what was going on here. I knew who he was and what I owed him, but these moments wandered skyward between desire and duty, creating an impenetrable cloud of isolated reality. He stayed close, and my soul sank into a state where every glance became deeper, more and more realized. I imagined our future days and the whole of the life we had lived together. It all seemed like something ordinary now. But this closeness and unforgivable warmth was giving me a calling desire to look much deeper, to leave all the familiar world outside this room. It was as if, in that moment, life had split into two parallel realities. Here, in our silence, and out there, beyond it, with normal boundaries. I closed my eyes, immersing myself in this moment as if I was afraid of losing it. Fear and love intertwined, merging into one, creating a strange symbiosis that caused a flame inside. I mentally fought my desires, but the sparks coming from Timmy still floated in the air. My hand moved up to his face and met his gaze, and that's when everything became clear. The moment his palm touched my chin, I realized it wasn't just a maternal feeling, but something much deeper. I was lying to myself. It wasn't just comfort, it was passion lurking under the cloak of maternal love, as if they were merging into one. The tension reached a fever pitch, and a silent symphony of desire rang through the air. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was about to jump out of my chest. I knew we were both standing on the edge of the abyss, and now the choice was up to me. I could pull away, force myself away and put things back the way they were, or I could jump into this abyss of feelings I didn't understand. Timmy pulled me closer, and it felt like there was no more distance between us. In that moment, all of our fears, all of our doubts dissolved, and all that was left was this invisible connection that we had never talked about. And with every breath I took, I realized it was more than a promise, it was the beginning of a new chapter in our lives. As if in a dream, I took a step toward this unknown. My mind searched for a way out, but my heart pulled me back to the embrace that had spoken of it long ago. This night, full of individual moments, seemed both endless and ordinary at the same time. I was ready for whatever came next, even if it meant breaking the familiar. I remained in prostration after Timmy pulled away. The air around us seemed to be saturated with anxious anticipation, and though he tried to relax, I knew neither of us could just let go of what had happened. The truth remained somewhere between us, like a ghost lurking in the corner of the room. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the chaos inside me. Then, suddenly, his boyish innocence shattered the silence, and I felt something squeezing my chest unclench. Timmy, apologizing, snapped back to reality, and with that movement, all the magic left us. I couldn't allow myself to take his apology as weakness. It was honesty, a sincere desire to make sense of what had come between us. As I tried to calm the storm in my soul, an unaccustomed awkwardness filled the room, and I was once again caught between two worlds: a mother trying to protect her son and a woman desperately searching for an answer to the question, what did this bond mean? Though I wished I could comfort him, my words felt like they were stuck in my throat, and I felt the familiar certainty recede. When he came back, closing the door behind him, the room was silent again. I sat on the edge of the bed, and it was as if the space between us was widening before my eyes. My hand reached for his, each touch sparking with electricity, and I felt my words "it's okay" remain only an echo in the void of our uncertainty. I could feel his hesitation as he tried to gather his thoughts, his voice shaking with ambiguous emotions. He was searching for answers, just as I was. We were both trapped in our own fears and expectations. And the moment he left my sight, covering his face with his hands, my heart clenched with an overload of feelings. This was my son, but something more, something that now held a sea of the unknown behind it. In a flash, I thought about how life-changing all these years had been. I had been a single mom, diligently trying to raise him, poking my nose in textbooks and trying to keep him on the right track. But all of that suddenly made no sense. I looked at him and realized that the closeness we shared had forever changed our dynamic. I found myself teetering on the edge between wanting to protect him and the unexpected attraction lurking in the shadows. Time slowed down, not allowing us to dodge the situation. I became more and more immersed in thoughts of how our lives could have been different if we had just allowed ourselves to be open. Each moment tore an invisible barrier between us. However, feelings had no boundaries, and in that ignorance lurked danger. Suddenly, the doorbell rang like a thunderclap, throwing us out of our confusion. The bell was a relief to me, but also a terror at the same time. I looked at Timmy, and in those brief seconds it was as if he had taken a breath, straightened his back, regained his charm. It was like a reminder that we were still part of this world that hadn't stopped existing. Timmy jumped up as if salvation had come to us from the street. He wanted to escape what had just happened, and the minute I did, I realized I was relieved myself. But it wasn't enough to distract me from the thought that things would never be the same between us again. I knew we had to do something about it. I stayed in my world, lost in thought, while Timmy opened the door and a stranger entered the room. He looked like my child, but in that moment everything changed. He was already a man. I waited for him to report what had happened, but instead they only exchanged useless comments. I couldn't help but feel like an observer, detached from the conversations that still carried a charge of tension. My soul was struggling inside. I was trying to figure out what the future held in store for us, when it was as if I was left on my own, like a normal mom, but in reality I was standing on the edge of a precipice, ready to step beyond the familiar. I looked at Timmy again, immediately registering his multiple facial expressions that reflected his own struggles. The stranger carried their conversation away, but I didn't hear a word. My gaze was fixed on the window, where the moonlight fell on us like a blessing, heralding a new beginning. In the silence, I realized how important it was to mark this moment, to intuit that our world had changed forever. I decided I had to be brave. I stood up, gathered all my resolve and walked over to them, the realization that this was our moment to start a new life. I could no longer hide behind familiar morals. The hunt for freedom and passion grew inside me, and as I felt my heart pounding, I could no longer back down. As I made my choice, I was reminded once again of what it meant to be a mother and a woman, and how it had once been reunited in the same breath. The magic of that night never lost its power, and now that all seemed lost, I decided that maybe we still had a chance. Under the stars, casting aside fear and doubt, I stepped forward to finally be heard. I didn't know how to live with it. My heart was pounding like it was trying to beat its way out of my chest, and it felt like the whole universe was holding its breath. In the silence between us, our feelings were heated and we were struggling to find the right words. We were like two flesh that had joined in the moment, suspended in a space that suddenly became inexpressibly important and terrifying at the same time. Timmy looked at me with such longing and confusion in his eyes that I felt my inner barrier crumble. He wasn't just my son, he had become something more. That realization filled the room, and I realized that we both needed time to deal with what was happening. I was on the edge of a moment, ready to take a step forward, when the silence was broken by an insistent pounding on the door, like the hard blow of a hammer on glass. Time seemed to stop as I flicked my gaze toward the door, and Timmy, as if caught off guard, pulled back a little further, his eyes filled with concern. I slowly made my way towards the door, suppressing my excitement and trying to pull myself together. When I opened the door, the room was filled with cold air, a stark contrast to the warmth of the atmosphere that had existed here before. I felt something hit my heart hard for a moment. The quiet peace of our intimacy was like a crack in the glass, ready to shatter. A slight flush of displeasure rose inside me at the fact that someone else was destined to disrupt this moment. I smiled, trying to hide the storm inside, and spoke the words that sounded like the crowd. "We're fine," I said, not believing my own words, and felt the tension between Timmy and I rise again. Closing the door behind me, I turned back to him. He was standing in his room again, absorbed in his own thoughts, and in that gaze I saw his longing again. The whole room was a reminder of how much we were losing. It had been a child's room, but now it seemed locked in the past, and standing next to me was an adult I no longer knew how to relate to. Timmy looked distracted and unsure, as if he was wavering on the line between what he felt and what was expected of him. I caught myself thinking that these moments could be pivotal, challenging and beautiful at the same time. I searched for the right words, but all I could express was the desire to continue. We both realized that our feelings were multiplying, confirming the platitude that the bond between us was fading and transforming. I couldn't ignore what was happening between us. Desire and awkwardness were intertwined, creating something new that we needed to talk about. I smiled softly, and took a step closer. There was a nascent hope inside me that maybe we should be honest. I reached out to him and felt his fingers slip into mine. The closeness was palpably real. I realized it was more than just a motherly touch. It was the beginning of an understanding that beyond the familiar could only be more complex. Feeling the ripple from the touch, I leaned a little closer, and in that moment, forgetting all fears for later, I just decided to be here with him, honest and open. I saw his face change slightly, it became relaxed, but his eyes, full of questions, continued to search out my inner world. This moment was crucial, and we both seemed to realize it. Timmy slowly looked into my eyes, and I felt all the tension, all the feelings we were trying to suppress, spill outward, filling the space between us. I couldn't hold back, and I reached for him, wrapping my arms around him. He moved closer, resting his veil against my shoulder, and in that moment, everything suddenly fell into place. Time stopped, and something else lit up between us. We both realized that we were in a newer world, where past and present ran parallel. The closeness we sought could no longer be sheltered under thin layers of stereotypes about what was right or wrong. In that moment, I realized that the line I had drawn between us had long since been erased. It was that touch, that tender moment, that was the beginning of a new chapter in our lives. I knew this handing over, this exchange, we were the only ones who could define what it meant. And in that piercing silence, encapsulated in the opportunity to open up, I felt confidence grow. This is it, our new reality. It is us, and only us, who must decide how to move forward. Together, slowly, perhaps shyly, but with determination to move towards the new. We could no longer hide from ourselves. We now needed to find a way forward, to that innermost place where life begins.